You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments below, and be sure to smash that like button. The transfer portal window opened, the spring portal window. It'll be open for a couple of weeks, and just as a reminder, I think everybody knows this by now, but just as a refresher, players can only enter the portal during these 2-week portal windows. You don't have to select your school during that time, but you can only enter your name into the portal during that window. Unless if you're a graduate student. If you're a graduate student, then you can enter the portal whenever you want and transfer whenever you want. There is also the SEC rule, which disallows intra-conference transfers from the spring portal window. So SEC players at SEC schools that enter the portal in this window cannot transfer within the conference. One of the big names already that's gone into the portal is Jacoby Matthews, the 5-star safety out of Ponchatoula, who was down to LSU A&M, picked A&M. He's been with the Aggies the last 2 years. He officially went into the portal today. Well, LSU would be a very natural fit for him. However, it doesn't seem like that would be possible because of that SEC rule. Now, if he wanted to challenge it, we'll see if something might go that way, as has been kind of discussed, but I don't know if that's something that will happen or could happen. So we'll keep our eye on it. What I did want to talk about a little bit here was the LSU approach here in the portal. As a reminder, Brian Kelly was asked in his last press conference before the spring game, so last week, I think it was maybe Thursday last week after practice, Wilson Alexander asked him specifically about portal targets.
Brian, as you go into the offseason, like you said, kind of evaluating this roster, other than maybe defensive tackle, are there positions that y'all might target in the transfer portal?
I don't see any other positions that we need to be in the transfer portal for other than the defensive tackle position, really.
So BK said defensive tackle there. And then after the spring game, if I recall correctly, he was talking about he was talking specifically about defensive tackle and how they were looking at addressing it in the portal. You know, if they could find starters there in the portal here in the spring portal window. And it stands to reason that when you look at the defensive tackle market, what LSU is looking for, you're not necessarily just looking for numbers. You're looking for guys that could potentially come in and be starters. And it may sound obvious, but look, Jacoby Guillory is a fifth-year player who's been a rotational guy and had a really good spring by all accounts. Brian Kelly mentioned him by name as a guy who developed tremendously here during spring. I don't know if you have that one about Jacobian. It's okay. But he mentioned Guillory by name as a guy who had a great spring and is really sort of emerged as a no doubt starter. Well, after that, you got Jalen Lee, and we know you've got the transfer Gio Pius from Wisconsin coming in. Kimo Makanaioli switched from offense to defensive line. You got Sean Washington, who came in from JUCO. So you're starting to build your numbers back there, but there's still a lot of question marks. So if there's a guy in the portal that's a no doubt, or guys, plural, in the portal that would be no doubt starters, you go get them. Because what you lost, maybe most importantly, from the last portal window, when you lost guys like Fitzgerald West and Bryce Langston, you lost Ty G. Hill, you lost guys that were your young depth, right? So it really just, it gutted your numbers. But the other thing that's important to remember as we move through this portal cycle are LSU's numbers. So I told you last week, unofficially, but as best I could gather, having some conversations with folks over at LSU, that the Tigers are at 88 scholarship players right now going into the fall. They're at 88. The scholarship limit is 85. So you've got to purge at least 3 players off your roster. If that's guys entering the portal, if that's guys medically retiring from football, whatever. You got to purge 3 scholarship players off your roster just to get to 85. So if you're going to add anyone else, that means you're going to have to continue to subtract from your roster. It's not as simple as saying, like when BK got here and they were so limited on numbers, they just had to add bodies. Now you have to be sort of selective. Because if you're going to purge someone or process someone off of your roster, You have to do so for someone that's going to make an immediate impact for you. So that's why you're looking at starting caliber players in the portal. Now, this is one thing that I think, if you're an LSU fan, should give you a lot of optimism. We have talked plenty in this NIL era about where LSU stands. And this has evolved since July of 21 to now. LSU had a collective, the Go Enterprises, that really never got very organized in the way they were going about things. It's not a knock. It was just everyone sort of feeling their way through it. Of course, they shut down Go Enterprises. They launched Bayou Traditions. And I know Match Point has gotten involved with Bayou Traditions as well. And they've started to get organized and continue their fundraising efforts. Now, it's still roughly the same 24 thereabouts supporters that are funding LSU's collective. And that's a precarious spot because when Gordon was here last week with us, and he talked about this on the record. And it's a precarious spot because if like one of those donors decides, I'm out, well, now you've significantly cut your budget, which is why I know the big push that is coming certainly is how do you engage fans to participate in the collective at a lower dollar amount. Things that places like Ole Miss and Auburn have done exceptionally well are engage the $20, $50, $100 a month donor. Because if you do that in massive numbers, if 10,000 fans are donating $20, $50, $100 a month, well, that starts to add up significantly. To supplement your high dollar boosters. But I'm sure LSU continues to work toward that end. But they had a great event over at the LSU indoor facility about a month or so ago, where they netted about $400K on that event. And what you've also seen is an appeal to those 24 or so supporters to increase their dollar spend, and it's worked. Gordon told us on the record that last year's roster, LSU's collective paid about $4 million in total. Now, by comparison, Texas's roster last year that went to the college football playoff, that was about a $9 million roster, okay? So it was more than double what LSU had spent. And the goal for LSU this year was get to about $7 million, and I was told today that they've surpassed that as far as the money that they have to spend. So the good news is they have even more resources to contribute. And I know I've told you this before, and I don't mind saying this on the record. Brian Thomas, Mason Smith, Mekhi Wingo were all offered $500,000 from LSU's collective to come back for another year. And all three obviously passed. And while it sucks that all three of the guys left, that means that's an additional $1.5 million that you had earmarked for players that didn't stay. So now you can go into this portal window knowing you have funds, right? And if you need to be aggressive and competitive, you can be. It's one of the things that hurt you a year ago. And I've given you this example, but LSU was hot and heavy after Braden Fisk and Keon Coleman last year. And also Fentrell Cypress, the cornerback that ended up at Florida State. Those three players that all ended up at Florida State, LSU wanted. And all three ended up at Florida State because Florida State had significantly greater NIL offers than LSU. What I'm here to tell you is this year, that's not going to be the case. Just the money alone that had been earmarked for those three players is now available on top of what they already had budgeted, which is even more than last year's team. So LSU is getting to a much healthier spot with its collective, with its organization, with how it's fundraising. And that's a process. And I don't know necessarily that you would say LSU is in the top 5 or top 10, top 15 in the country as far as that, but they're getting to the point where when they do target guys individual, like they're going to be competitive with who they want. So, I mean, we all know, I think Philip Bleedy is one of the defensive tackles they're after. That's the defensive tackle from Indiana, who started his career at Texas Tech, spent this past year at Indiana. He's married with 2 children. So you talk about, again, another guy that is an adult, right? With 1 year of eligibility remaining. And then I was also told, I don't want to mention names specifically, but there were 2 G5 defensive linemen that are expected to hit the portal. One has hit the portal, and one with ties to Louisiana that would also be targets for LSU. And as I'm told, these would be starting caliber players if LSU is able to get them. These aren't rotational pieces. It would be akin to Braden Fisk a year ago. A guy when he was 18, didn't have big school offers, went to Western Michigan, had an incredible career as he grew and developed, went to Florida State and dominated. It's a similar path to what they saw a year ago with Braden Fisk that they're looking. So the Tigers are prepared. They have their war chest ready, and they're going to be competitive. And I would be fall over stunned if LSU didn't add 1 or 2 more interior defensive linemen in this portal window. And the other thing I'll tell you, the position, this is going to sound obvious, but cornerback is another spot where they're not going to take a player just to take another player. But if there is a starter that hits the portal, LSU will be competitive and will go make a play, bringing in a starting caliber player in the portal at cornerback. So while Brian Kelly said there's no need to target anything other than defensive tackle, if there is a corner available that's a starting caliber player, LSU feels confident they can go make a play at that as well. So Tigers are going to make this interesting here in this portal window. They're not done, but remember it's gains and losses, because you're at 88 scholarship players. You're going to lose at least 3 more, and if you're going to add 1, 2, 3 more scholarship players in the portal, that's 1, 2, 3 more players currently on the roster that you're going to have to lose. So expect to see comings and goings in this portal cycle for LSU. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.